After we learned the basic building blocks of our future program, the different data structure that Julia provides us, we can learn in this segment how to organize them in the program, how to decompose the program in smaller logical parts that do each a certain specific task, the individual functions, or the constructs that allow then this task to be repeated under different conditions, for example, the for block. So let's start the segment by running the usual commands to initialize the environment. We start the segment with an important concept that is the scope of the variables. The scope of the variables, it is the region of the code where the variable can be accessed directly and in particular without using prefixes. So wherever I can refer to given variables, that is the scope where that variable exists. And modules, function, and several kind of blocks, in particular the for block, but notably not the if block that doesn't define any scope. All these other blocks and functionality that I listed introduce an inner scope that inherits from the scope where the block or the function is defined. And here I wrote that for function, this is not the scope where the function is called, but is really the scope where the function is defined. And all of the variables that are defined outside any blocks or any functions, they are called global variables, and they are global with reference to the modules where they are defined. So each module will have its list of global variables, and if we are on the REPL, on the terminal, we are inside the main module, so the main module will have its own global variables, and all the other variables are local variables. The important point to retain is that these local variables, this variable defined in a for block that already exists as a global, so here I make the example of G. So here we are a global variables, and we are here inside a for loop, and you can see here that I'm defining a variable with the same name G. Is this variable a local variable, or I'm referring to the global variable? Here is the trick, and the rules is specific in this case for this rule is specific on Julia, and depends on the fact if we are working interactively like here, or we are working, this code is part of a file and we are just loading the file, using the file, and the rules are different, and let's see how. So here I have a for loop that ends here, and inside this for loop I'm defining some variables that at this point we know these are local variable because it doesn't exist at the global level, and we are however also using this G that is already present. So the rules is that when we are running interactively, this G refer to the global G, while if I am in a file, if I'm loading, and we will see later on loading the same code from a file, this G will be a local G will be treated as a new local variables, and we will have a warning telling us, hey, attention, G is already present as a global variable. We can remove this uncertainty about G being local or being global by specifically writing local G or global G to specify that G is local or global. But if you don't write nothing, like here, G will be treated globally for when we use here interactively the script, and locally when instead the script is run by in a file. So attention to this point. Then here you can see that I'm also creating an inner loop because I want to I want that you note that local variable here are not actually local within also inner scope, but simply here there is no uncertainty. This is the same variable as this one. It's not a new one, a new variable that is introduced in this scope, but it's just inherit the local variables at the higher scope. The only kind of variable for which we have this problem are the global variables as G. So let's going to make this for loop, and so here it prints what happens to this variable. So first here is create the variable and set it equal to G2, that is 20, and increase the variables. But what is interesting is that now what happens to G? So G here will be G post the last 7, or will be 2 as it was defined here. We said we are interactively, so this is treated as the global variable, so this one will be 7. Now the same code here I posted also for a function, because here there is no uncertainty with functions. There is no this mechanism that here we can use global global variables. Here this G is a local variable that is defined here within the function foo. So if I define the function, and then so the last one G was 7, then I call foo. Here I have a G post 23, but then if I do here the global one, it remained 7. So here what we had is that G was 2. Here in the for loop it was treated as a global, so it changed. G became 7. But then when we ran this code here, this function, this G was a local variable that didn't influence the global variable, so it remained equal to 7. Now let's go to run the same code here. Let's just to set it back G equal to 2, so our global variables, and let's with this include command we run the same code here, but in a script in a non-interactive way, and we can see here, I don't know where it started, but what it did is that G always remained 2. If I type G, it didn't change, it didn't become 7 like in the for loop, because the same code here has been treated as G as a local variable. So attention to this difference in the scope, that when you are running interactively, you can use inside for loops global variables, and this change according to what happens in the for loop. While if you are in a script, you have to, if you want to use a global variable, you have to explicitly write global in front of the variable.